So as an inventor, I love to come up with wild and crazy ideas and make them come to life. Each new idea should be bigger and bolder than the previous one. And so I'm really excited today to be sharing with you my latest, craziest idea. I want to invent inventors. So why, you might ask, would I want to invent inventors? Maybe I just don't want to be that lone nut we saw earlier. But I'm a big geek, and in 1957, Richard Feynman gave a talk at Caltech, and it was called "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom." And he heralded the coming of nanotechnology with this seminal talk. And I'm a nanotechnologist. And what really drew me to this was that he had a very simple idea. What if you took something, they made something smaller, they made something smaller, they made something smaller. And he called this 100 tiny hands. Imagine the impact of 100 tiny hands working together, collaborating forward. So I've used this concept a lot of my research. I'll talk a little bit about the nanotechnology and the micro technologies that I've developed over the years. But imagine the impact if we could now extend this to inventing inventors. I love being an academic. I love being a professor. I think it's the best job in the world because instead of what I could do in my lifetime, if I could inspire one of you to do something that will positively impact the world, I felt like I've contributed more. So imagine the exponential power that we have if we can all work together, if each one of you became an inventor and inspired other inventors to become inventors. So, as a card-carrying entrepreneur, I know that to start off any pitch, you have to meet an unmet need. And I would argue that there's a really pressing unmet need in this country in terms of spurring creativity. When recent grads were polled about their education, they said that creativity was really needed in their workplace, but they didn't get it in their curriculum. So when their bosses were polled, when executives were polled, over 90% of them believe that innovation is a strategic priority and the main ingredient for a more competitive economy. When CEOs were polled, they found that creativity was the most important quality of leadership that they were looking for in their employees. Sadly, creativity is in short supply in the US. We all know about the educational crisis where our students are told that they're doing worse and worse in math and science over the years. And as a result, we've been trying to beat math and science into them, right? We've been trying to move to national standards on reading, writing, and arithmetic, while the rest of the world is moving on trying to spur creativity. So how do we reignite creativity? I feel like this is coming at a loss to trying to meet national standards. We're missing our best and our brightest because they don't want to go into math and science anymore because they think that math and science is all about getting the right answer at the back of the book. And I was really bad in school. I struggled like crazy because I didn't think the way other kids thought. And it took me a really long time to find my footing and to find that I could be good at math and science. And I'll talk a little bit about my process, but I think we're missing out by just testing for IQ. Because we have a creativity crisis in the US. We were always the most innovative country in the world. 2012, the Global Innovation Index ranked us 10th in innovation. The World Economic Forum Global Competitive Report ranked us 7th. I would argue the public school system is failing us because we're teaching children the way that we taught children 100 years ago. The public school system in the US was built by guys like Carnegie in the Industrial Revolution, right? They wanted factory workers. And if you think about your public school system, your K through 12 education, it's very much like a factory line where the teachers serve as foremen and the kids are batched by age groups. I know there are inventors in this room. I know there are innovators. We know the keys to how to invent. We know the structure and the paradigm to do this. You start with phrasing a question. Instead of having everybody think like you want to inspire your kids to think differently than you. That's the only way you can make change in this country. You want to identify the frame that you're looking at things and then find alternative ways to look at things. You want to generate all possible solutions, to think creatively and to think broadly and widely. Then you want to incubate your ideas, meld it back into the basic scientific process, and then disseminate your ideas and share with others, much like we were doing at TEDx. So what is the key to being an inventor? You can remember as pig in mud. And we have matching boots. So I will tell you a little bit about my pig in mud story, or one of my pig in mud stories. So my research, I am in a field called Lab on a Chip. It's a relatively new field. And the idea behind it is to bring large pieces of equipment. If you go into a pharmaceutical company or if you go into a chemistry lab, the labs would look a lot like that, where you have very expensive handling systems. In academia, the expensive handling systems are our graduate students. And you have slow reaction times, not of the graduate students, but of the actual chemical reactions. If you can bring everything down to the small scale, you get advantages in the physics. You get advantages of scaling for mixing, separating, and detecting. Now, you could say that it's far-fetched to bring everything down, to bring a little diagnostic down to your bedside, so you can test for infectious diseases at the point of care instead of having to go into a hospital. But I would argue, being a geek, I love to read up on history, and the picture on the right is ENIAC, the first digital computer built in 1947. I love showing that picture because that computer was a very, very slow and not powerful computer at all. And it weighed 30 tons. It had 17,000 vacuum tubes. And I love to point out to my students that it had 5 million hand-soldered joints. So whenever they complain I make them do things that are tedious, 5 million hand-soldered joints, imagine. And then along came Jack Kilby, and he was playing around one day during a holiday at Texas Instruments, and he came up with the integrated circuit. And this replaced the vacuum tubes and revolutionized the way people did computing. He won the Nobel Prize for that very ugly chip that you see on the right. And so there are a lot of analogies that we can draw between the integrated circuit industry, the computer industry, and lab on a chip, because we try to do the exact same things. The things that you can do with your electrical circuits, you can do exactly with your microfluidics. The problem with this, though, is that we piggyback on the semiconductor industry. And this is a problem because we can't get these chips out to the chemistry labs, the biology labs, the doctors, the nurses, who need to use these chips at the point of care. They're too expensive. So I wanted to flip this paradigm on its head. The reason why micro and nano fabrication is so expensive is because it's very difficult and expensive to pattern at very high resolution. Right? You need to go into a clean room, dress up in these bunny suits, just like the Intel Inside commercials, to do your processing. But what happens if you are a doctor and you don't have access to a clean room? The technology right now for lab on a chip is very much stuck in the engineering labs that make the chips. When I started my first academic position at UC Merced, this is what the campus looked like. So I stared at the cows for a while and realized that as a young junior professor, it was publish or perish. So after a couple of months of making eyes at the cow, I decided to go back to basics. And the basics for me, the fundamentals as an engineer, was my favorite children's toy, Shrinky-dinks. And my mom is in the audience here, so I love to embarrass her. I love to take her to class and point out my mom. My mom's a chemist, and she gave me a lot of educational toys. And I really love science because science was about playing with my educational toys with my mom. So I remembered that Shrinky-dinks, right, you could pattern at the large scale and then shrink down to the small scale. So all I wanted to do was make a poor man's version of the silicon wafer so that I could keep my job. And so for those of you who don't know what Shrinky-dinks are, I try to explain to my students that they look like transparencies. My students have no idea what transparencies are. It's a PowerPoint generation. So I found an old commercial. So you draw on these pre-stressed polystyrene sheets, and you cut them out, and you stick them in an oven for 3 minutes, and they shrink to a fraction of their size. So I decided, well, this might save my career. So I decided to publish on this, and my colleagues warned me that this could very well be career suicide. But I didn't have any graduate students at the time. My undergraduate was my first author on a paper. And we published it, and we called it Shrinky-dink microfluidics. A couple of months later, the editor of Lab on a Chip called me up, and he said he's never seen anything like it. We had more downloads than all the other Royal Society of Chemistry journals. They own about 12 journals. They're the preeminent publisher in chemistry and analytics. And we had more downloads than all their other journals combined. So we thought we were onto something. And so in the years since, whoops, let me go back one. In the years since, we've developed this technology a little bit more. I thought it would be fun to watch the word shrink. But the idea behind it is to pattern at the large scale and then shrink everything down to the small scale. And since then, we've developed this technology to, we have a suite of different technologies that we've developed all based on this concept for tissue engineering, point of care diagnostics. Most recently, we're getting into wearable, flexible electronics. We make nanostructures for surface enhanced sensing, and we make surfaces. So suffice it to say that this has really been a Cinderella story for me. It's been a great story, and it felt like it's really come full circle, because in the beginning my students didn't even want to go to conferences because they said their colleagues would laugh at them if they presented on a children's toy. Now I love to go to conferences because the biggest, most serious guys in my field go around saying Shrinky-dink microfluidics. So we talked about storytelling earlier. I thought this is my students' recount of my life. So this is the rendition of my life. And there's a point to this, because I'm trying to figure out how to translate this to the next generation. What was it about my story, and what can we take away from this, from my pig in mud story? There's my mom. Everyone say hi to my mom during the break. So what was the salient point to all of this? The salient point, right, the key to teaching our next generation, to get them to fall in love with math and science and engineering the way I did. I'm very interested in this. I have a little sister for the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. She just turned 8. Hi, Melu. And I want to turn her into a scientist. So how do you do this? How do you generate this thought process? What was the salient message from my life story? It's play, right? It's play. So there was an interesting paper that came out a couple of years ago by Bo Lato. He's a neuroscientist, and he wanted to see who can do science. This was the youngest cohort of first authors ever. They were 8 years old, 25 8-year-olds. Published this paper in Biology Letters. And I love this paper because, first of all, it started with Once Upon a Time. But it embraces uncertainty, and it talks about coming up with a question, figuring out how to answer that question, and coming up with experiments to do so. And I also love this paper because all the figures were in crayon. But the message is, we play, right? By playing, you can learn. We embrace uncertainty. Failure is okay. I think in this society, we're too afraid to fail. Failing is okay. You only learn by playing. Right? I'm a tennis player. I know that I can watch all the YouTube videos I want. I will never become a better tennis player just by watching other people play. I have to play. This was the paradigm for the Nick Bollettieri tennis camp. This is the paradigm for boy bands, right? You learn by doing. We play music, we play tennis, we play sports. Why can't we play science? And I propose to do that here. I'm trying to start a new program. It's called BioEngine, for biomedical engineering, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And we're trying to group students together to do a graduate degree where they will actually work on a real medical device. They will start from design conception to working prototype, and they'll have a company when they graduate. And this is the perfect place to do it because right here at UC-Irvine, right around us, we have the highest concentration of biomedical device companies in the US. And we are right in the heart of it. So you might think that this is absurd, that this is a crazy, whacked out idea, just like everyone thought my Shrinky-dinks idea was crazy in the beginning. But I do have preliminary data to indicate that it is possible. I teach a senior design class, and my students know that I'm an entrepreneur. And so they came to me, they said, you know, you're an entrepreneur. How about letting us come up and define the senior design projects? And I said, well, you guys can do a startup in the class, a startup idea, based on your own idea, if you can convince me that it's a good enough idea. So they pitched different ideas, and two of the teams that we decided to move forward with started from a problem that they were addressing, a medical problem they were addressing. Jared and Tim, that you see on the left-hand side here, they had this idea to make an ultrasound knee brace for therapeutics. And they prototyped it, they built it, they got it working, they got data off of it. They presented it at the senior graduation party that we held for them. TEDxUCIrvine Medical, which is a big medical device company here, they were a sponsor of my class. They came to the class, they heard Jared and Tim present their idea. They hired both the students and they took their IP. They bought the IP that the students had filed on this technology. The other project came in first runner-up in the national NIH debut competition. The students learned to do this. I had a very small part in this. I worked with them, I coached them, I was their coach. I didn't stand at the blackboard lecturing to them. They actually did it, they built stuff. So, inventing inventors. I think it's possible. I think to stimulate creativity, to quote Einstein, one must develop a childlike inclination for play. So I encourage all of you to go out and play. On a more serious and sad last note, I just want to pay tribute to our friend Sose here at UC-Irvine. She was a friend of mine. She was the financial analyst for my lab. And on Friday, she and her husband, they just got married, died in a car accident. And she was a very important part of this community. And so I just wanted to spend a moment to pay tribute to her, because she certainly did embrace life and she loved to play. So. Thank you.